85th day of class, last day of the first semester, and today's class was about the economic philosophy of the Columbian Exchange. And today's class had more of an economics vibe than it did a history vibe, but you really can't take economics and business out of the history at this particular moment in time. And we started class here and now. We started in modern times at our school, and I had you look at the map of the school. Now, I had you think like a business person, and I gave you two scenarios. Now, in scenario one, all laws had to be followed, and I gave you $3,000 in capital. Now, I know a lot of people are saying capital. Lansing is the capital of Michigan. No, I'm not talking that type of capital. Capital would be seed money, money you use to get a business started. Then I asked you the question, what good or goods or services will you be providing? Now, a good would be something, a physical item. You make a hot dog stand, you're giving a hot dog to somebody. A service would be math tutoring, and you're doing a service for somebody. You could make money with both. And I asked you the location, where you're going to place it, which demographic are you targeting, which business strategies will you be using. So what we looked at is we looked at the school, and they had a lot of really creative people, and they said, okay, where do people congregate? Now, I think the majority of people attempted to make their money here in the cafeteria because people need to eat, and that's called inelastic. There's elastic, inelastic. Elastic are things you can do without. Inelastic are needs, and eating is a need. And people put their businesses in the cafeteria. Some people set up shop in the courtyard, but then we had the question, that's a very seasonal business. Are you able to make money all year round? Now, some people located it in the gym, in the locker room, and they were going to sell Gatorades. After you're done training, I'm going to sell Gatorades and whatnot. And even the real inelastic stuff, some people were hanging around the restrooms providing things that you really need for the restroom. So initially, going into the legal scenario, people were primarily keeping it in terms of food items and that kind of thing. And then I changed it up. In scenario two, I said laws do not need to be followed. This is the wild, wild west here. You can make your dough however you want. Same criterion for the other items. And then we got a whole different type of industry. In fact, the biggest industry that people were going to set up was marijuana. In fact, I had one class where 7 people wanted to sell marijuana, and I, respectfully asked them. I said, "Hey, there's 7 of you. Assuming there are 100 people in this building who would actually want your product, how are you going to stand apart from the others?" Because they realized it's a very lucrative undertaking, and some banded together into partnerships saying, now we have $6,000. Some discuss it. You take the very high end. I'm going to carve out a niche for the very low end. I'm going to provide this. And people started making money, and they kind of forgot about ethics. I shouldn't say kind of forgot about ethics. They totally forgot about ethics. And we were engaging in some activities that would be considered vice. I mean, there was a gambling casino. Somebody opened up a bar, marijuana, vaping, and cigarettes, the whole nine. So it was interesting to watch as more of a social experiment where people abandon ethics for the sake of money. Now, not everybody. Now, some people kept with scenario one. And what they said, I don't need to do anything shady or greasy or illegal. I'm already making my dough legally. So I guess what was illuminated from our discussion is that most people, most ethical people, would like to make money in constructive, positive, ethical ways. I think the most lucrative one was somebody said, I'm going to bring a franchise into the cafeteria. In this case, it was Starbucks. And I'm going to strike a deal. I'm going to have Starbucks take 90% of the profit. I'm going to get 10% of the profit residually in perpetuity. And even when I'm out of high school, I'm going to still make that money. Now, if that actually came to fruition, why do you have to resort to something shady? You're making plenty of money off coffee and legitimate things. Now, this is more of a thought exercise. And it was interesting, I think, and illuminated the ethics. But ultimately, people were going to get that money. No matter what they decided or their ethics, it was getting money was first and foremost. So let's take a step back. So going away from modern times, we talked about our first engine of economics that we learned about, the Silk Road. And these were the commodities traded along the Silk Road. Now, in terms of shady business, there really wasn't a need for it. You could make a very good living providing what the people needed. And again, the vast expanse of geography, being a middleman on that Silk Road, and recover the Kushan and the Parthians, the people who were the middlemen of the Silk Road made a lot of money. And this was the economy of the time. Networks that were bringing commodities. The chief one, it's hard to read here, is silk. They even called it the Silk Road. And then we have a pronounced change. Now, if I fast forward in time to the 16th century, once Christopher Columbus arrives in North America, the other European nations start doing the same thing. And we have this exchange across the Atlantic Ocean called the Columbian Exchange. And if you look at these commodities, huge business empires then, big empires today, are predicated upon these commodities. And each of them have a different story. And these are multi-billion-dollar businesses in some cases. And some people said, well, tobacco, heck, you addict people. You bring it over and you addict people, you are going to make that money. Not a very ethical way. Some of them were a lot more ethical. I mean, if you bring an item over and people enjoy the fruit, no problem. But I told a story about the past, about this commodity here, coffee bean. Now, Europeans, when they arrived in, when Europeans saw the coffee plants, which originated in Africa, they asked, can we buy them? Can we have them? And the coffee growers said, no, we know what you're going to do with it. You're going to try to undercut our business. They stole coffee bean plants and had to, sneak it away. It's theft. And they brought them over to the Americas. And those very small, limited number of plants were the foundation of a huge multi-billion-dollar industry. Now, the moral of this story is, unlike the Silk Road, where the Silk Road had, people who had carved out their niche for whatever they were doing based upon geography, based upon what was there, this was much more competitive, and people were going to make their money no matter what. And they were going to push these products to market no matter what. Now, that's not what a lot of people consider ethical business, but that's what was happening at the time. Which brings us to two terms, mercantilism versus free market. Now, the Columbian Exchange rings more of mercantilism, and mercantilism is a fairly simple proposition. You buy little and you sell a lot. And essentially, this little diagram here, the mother country's treasury, you got that money, you create a balance of trade where you're going to sell, and buy little. And the question is, if they don't want to buy your product, what do? Well, you really kind of shove it down their throats. You're colonists, you're a big European nation, you take somebody over, not only do you take over their land, you take over their economic way of living, you also have them buy the product that you're producing. You are going to get very wealthy as a nation at the expense of others. Now, if you compare this to free market economies, the word free is the operative word. People are driven by profit, you don't really get involved, competition, and the market will correct itself. And, if it's not a good product, people don't buy it, you go out of business. If it's a really good product, people buy it, and you make a lot of money. And if you read Adam Smith, and we read him in class from a very, very influential book called Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith was a proponent of free markets. And again, there's no mistake that 1776 is an important year in our history. Same year he wrote this book was the same year the Declaration of Independence was written. And Adam Smith was a proponent of the free market. And what he said is, if free markets, the price will go down. And I'm going to compare mercantilism versus free markets. I'll give you an easy example, orange juice. If I'm a mercantile sort of philosophy, only oranges come from Florida can be used. Now, if you need orange juice, you're going to pay a lot of money. Now, a free market, for example, Brazil raises a lot of oranges. You bring those in, they have to compete with the Florida orange growers, and the price goes down. The consumer pays less. So there's two fundamental philosophies, with mercantilism being more of the vibe of the Columbian Exchange 16th century, which moves away eventually to free markets. And from class, and I asked people in class some examples, I thought the best examples, mercantilism would be auto insurance. You must buy auto insurance in Michigan. You cannot get around from that. And people are saying, hey, I'm saving up, I'm scraping, I'm trying to get my car. I can get the car, I just don't have enough for insurance. I'd rather run the risk of getting on the road. If I get into an accident, I'll pay for it, whatever it costs. You can't do that in Michigan. That's against the law. And the insurance company is going to get paid. The insurance company is going to get that money no matter what. And students in class said that's mercantile. eBay came up as a free market example where you put something online, if it's lousy and people don't want it, they don't buy it. If it's really good, they will go back and forth and the price goes up. So I think these are really great examples that students came up with to show these types of philosophy. And to wrap up, what we've learned today, I hope, is after Columbus, the world economy changed drastically. This cross-Atlantic trade of commodities going back and forth, big economic empires being built upon these. The world is global. The world is connected. Those 4 world zones are connected. And eventually you put mercantilism, this I'm going to get my stuff to market and buy little, paired with coerced labor and slavery. This created the triangular trade route of economy, which is this. So the European nations get slaves. We learned about that a couple classes ago. They bring it to the Americas. In the Americas, they work to get raw materials. Those raw materials go back where they're turned into finished products. So, for example, you buy slaves, you you get cotton. Cotton comes here and it's turned into shirts. You sell those shirts. Oftentimes, you force them into your colonies' markets. Do they have to buy your shirts? And with those extra profits, you get more slaves. And they go across to the Americas and work for raw material. And this was the economic engine of the time. Not a particularly ethical engine, but nevertheless, the way things worked. Thank you for watching.